guys, I'm Tria. This is my little sister Aria. Today we're going to be talking about how we got into Oxford University. I graduated from Oxford Medical School last year.
And I'm starting at Oxford this year.
And what are you going to study?
English.
So today we are going to be talking about everything that we did to get into Oxford University for medicine and for English. Let's get into the video. So I thought we'd start by talking about why we chose our respective subjects.
So I think I decided to study English because it was the A level that felt like the least work. Like, it didn't feel like I was working, it felt like I was just reading. And when I asked my English teacher to recommend me more books to read, I actually enjoyed it the more I learned and I wanted to know more. So that was a good sign for me.
How long ago did you decide that you wanted to study English? Like, how many years?
I actually only decided I wanted to study it after the first term of year 12 because I wanted to do like some kind of humanity, but I had no idea really.
So that's a bit different from me. So I wanted to study medicine, I think, from about the age of 13. I obviously had some doubts later on, but I think from about age 13 I had decided that medicine was for me, and that's because, well, I really love science, especially biology, but I also really enjoyed the human aspect, so talking to different people, having a relevance directly to people's lives. So this is why I chose medicine. I did have a little bit of a wobble around year 11 and year 12 where I thought that perhaps a career in the sciences was for me, but then I did a taster course in material science and I realised that actually I found that working in a lab only was a bit boring because I wanted that direct human relevance, so that's why I decided to study medicine. Okay, let's talk about why we chose Oxford. So I guess I'll start. So I chose Oxford for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons was that it was a really good university. You know, it's on the World League tables and that's something that was really appealing to me. Also, for medicine, different medical schools have different schools of philosophy, different teaching styles. So Oxford was one of the traditional medical schools. There was a big split between preclinical and clinical medicine, and there was a lot of emphasis on research and learning fundamental sciences before you moved on to clinical, and I really liked that. That's why I was thinking about universities such as Oxford and Cambridge, and then I really liked Oxford when I went there in the open day, so that's why I chose Oxford. What about you?
So I chose Oxford partly because it is such a big name and I thought that when I'm going to get jobs and stuff in the future, it's probably going to help me to have that on my CV. But also because I see my sister go and like I visited her a lot of times, I just felt less stressed out about moving out because it felt like kind of a second home, so it was easier.
And I've had a lot of time to think about Oxford and medical school, having been there for 6 years, and I think, to be honest, and I want to know whether you agree or not, that I think the name Oxford is probably more useful for humanities subjects in comparison to medicine in the early years. Yeah, I definitely think that having the stamp of Oxford is very useful for careers, especially careers where the trajectory isn't specifically laid out for you. So with English as a degree, you can then go on to do any type of job that you want. I mean, it's the same for medicine, but in medicine there is a specific career path within the NHS that you can follow. So I think that having a degree from Oxford opens more doors, potentially. The next thing we're going to talk about is our academics. So obviously academics are really important to get into Oxford because Oxford is a very academic environment with a very high standard of academic excellence and research. So when Oxford are choosing applicants, they really look at how well you perform in school. So let's start by talking about GCSEs. So shall we talk about our subjects? Do you want to go first?
For GCSEs, I did English, literature and language, maths, triple science, and geography, history, French, computer science, and further maths.
So I was quite similar. So I did English language, English literature, biology, chemistry, physics, I did maths, and then for my additional subjects I did history, geography, German, Latin, and further maths. So we did almost exactly the same subjects, except I did German, you did French, and that's it.
You did Latin and I did computer science.
Yeah, that's true. So when I was doing GCSEs, we didn't have computer science as an option. I don't know, I find Definitely computer science is more relevant now, so maybe I would have chosen that instead of Latin. But the reason I chose Latin was because a lot of medical terminology is based in Latin, so I just thought maybe it would be useful to have a bit of grounding in Latin.
I think that my GCSEs weren't as stressful as I thought they were going to be, because I had a lot of help from my school and I started revising like in the summer of year 10. So when it actually came to the exams, I wasn't in like a cramming mindset. It was kind of just like the end of a really long journey.
So I think, I mean, I've talked about this before in previous videos. I think that I probably worked too hard for my GCSEs, and I think maybe you learnt from my experiences and then had a slightly different GCSE experience. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
So for me, I studied very hard for GCSEs, and that was primarily driven by a sense of fear. And when I say that, I mean fear of failure. The maximum that I revised was 10 hours a day. So obviously this is quite intense, and when I say 10 hours, I mean actually 10 hours of focused study. I was probably at my desk for the entire time between waking and going to sleep, apart from mealtime. This paid off in the sense that I got good grades. However, I did end up sacrificing doing other things. How much revision did you do?
I think in the like summer of year 10 and stuff, I only did around 3 hours a day because I was just preparing. But then in like the Easter holidays in year 11 and in study leave, I did a maximum of around 6 hours, I would say. So I didn't do like the big marathon studying like you did, just because I didn't have the attention span really. But I still think that, yeah, there's different ways of doing it.
Definitely, and I don't regret working as hard as I did, I think, because in the end it did pay off in terms of grades. However, I think you can achieve really good grades without having to completely dedicate your entire life to studying. So, what GCSE grades did you get?
So I got 11 9s.
Yay, okay. And can you explain what a 9 is?
So it's like in the new system of numbers, I think 8 and 9 both relate to A star, and then like 7's an A and so on. So yeah.
When I did them, we didn't have numbers, we had grades where A star is equivalent, like you said, to an 8 or a 9. So for my subjects, I also got 11 A stars. And do you think that that was useful for Oxford?
Yeah, I think so, because like when Oxford people came to our school and stuff, they always talked about how grades were really important, especially relating to our school. We go to a school where like we get a lot of support and it's quite high achieving, so the expectation is that in that kind of environment you would be getting the top grades if you want to go to Oxford. I think it depends on what the average grades are at your school, and like that your grades would just be expected to be a bit more than that.
So because I got good grades for GCSEs, I thought that I had a good foundation for applying to Oxford. Do you agree?
Mine was kind of the opposite, in that from about year 10 I knew I wanted to go to Oxford, and I was like, I don't even know what I want to study, so how am I going to start working towards this goal? And I thought like the first step is I need to take my GCSEs really seriously, because that's the first thing I can do to kind of, that's going to make a difference to going to Oxford.
I see. So now we're going to be talking about work experience and volunteering. So for medicine, doing work experience is a really vital part of your application. I have talked about this in more detail in a video which you can watch, but I will just outline what work experience means for medical school. So there's a couple of reasons why people do medical work experience. Firstly, it is to decide whether, and this goes for all work experience that you do, is to decide whether you see yourself in that career. So for medicine, doing work experience in a hospital or a clinical environment is really useful to see if you like it and you can see yourself there. Another reason, obviously, is to show your dedication to the subject or the course that you are applying for. For me, I did quite a lot of work experience. For clinical attachments, you have to be 16. So I started when I was 16 in the summer after my GCSEs, and I started by doing a week of work experience in a local hospital in an obstetrics and gynecology department. So this was really interesting because, you know, I'd never really spent any time in a hospital before. Following on from this, I did 2 weeks of work experience the following summer, and this was at a care home where I would help the residents with their daily life. I would make them tea, I would chat to them, and then I would help out with the different arts and crafts classes. So this was a really good experience because it was a caring role, and although it wasn't specifically in a clinical environment, it still demonstrates the qualities that you need to be a good doctor. And then for volunteering, because medicine, or being a doctor, is a altruistic role to a certain extent, and it's a caring role, it looks really good on your application if you can demonstrate that you have done some kind of caring or some kind of volunteering in your free time. So I started out volunteering in year 10, so when I was 14, and I started by going to a local nursery. I then did some volunteering at a school. So next to our school we had a primary school, so I went to year 3 and I helped teach maths to the kids there. So I think for English and for humanities it's very different. So do you want to tell us about work experience and volunteering?
As the course I was studying wasn't like a vocational thing, work experience is a bit less straightforward, and especially for a university like Oxford, isn't that much of a focus. So in comparison, I did a lot less work experience. I only did one, which was a day at a marketing team for a charity, because I thought it's kind of to do with written communication, and that's kind of related to the skills that you use in English. There are a lot of different things that you could do if you wanted to kind of show your interest in the subject and your ambitions for a future career. What my English teacher told me is that for English, it's better to do something to do with communication, even if that's like verbal communication, than something that's related to English but doesn't really include the skills. For example, it might be just as good to do something with your local newspaper. It could also be with a radio, or it could even just be volunteering in a charity shop and talking to people. That might be better than shelving books at your local library, which might seem more related to English but doesn't have the communication element to it.
And did you talk about your work experience in your interview or your personal statement?
I did write a line about it in my personal statement. I just talked about how I thought it was interesting that the words you use to present a certain story for the charity, it was for a hospital, so it was about like making people feel sympathy. So they were using language to kind of awaken the viewer's emotions, and so it was kind of using the skills that you use in English. Yeah.
And having done that, do you think that you would want to work in a charity or a charity sector?
Yeah, I think I might want to do that. It is a big career that English graduates go into. Yeah.
Okay, so I also talked about my work experience and volunteering in my personal statement, and to a certain extent in my interviews. I think obviously because when you apply for university, you apply to more than one. You have to tailor your application so that it is relevant for all the medical schools or all the universities you apply to. So although it is true that Oxford is a very academic place that focuses more on your academic potential and grades and such, you still have to, especially for medicine, demonstrate all the other skills that are required to be a doctor, for example, altruism and good communication, teamwork, leadership, and so on. So I did write about those things in my personal statement, and I did talk about them in interviews, but probably more at the other medical school interviews in comparison to Oxford. The next thing we're going to talk about is extracurricular activities. So what did you do?
So from the beginning of year 12, I decided to sign up to any club that had a relation to English. I ran a creative writing club at our school for younger students, and I wrote an article for our school's literature magazine, and I also joined a book club.
Very nice. And did you do anything else, like sports or music or drama?
Yeah, so the main thing I did was Indian classical dance, and I kept that up, and actually I was able to write about it in my personal statement because our group, we wrote and put on a play, and then I was thinking that, as it's a play, it's kind of relevant to English, so I included it.
So for medicine, what I generally tell people is that whatever extracurricular activity you do, in a sense, you can use that to demonstrate the skills that make a good doctor. So you don't have to necessarily pick out things specifically that are relevant to medicine, but you can continue to do the things that you want. You can talk about how they make you a better person or a better candidate. So for example, the key qualities that people are looking for in medicine are, as I mentioned before, teamwork, leadership, empathy, time management, organisation. That's it essentially. So I did rowing, which is a sport, which I then talked about teamwork and leadership and time management. I then talked about music, so I played the flute and violin and got grade 8s and then played in orchestra. So I kind of talked about teamwork as well in that. And then I also did a couple of things that were more related to science and medicine. So I was the leader of our school's medical society, where basically we met every week and we did things like mock interviews and we talked about current affairs that are relevant to science and healthcare. That was a leadership thing and that was specifically for medicine. Because I liked writing as well, I also was on the school editor board for our magazine, but I was the science editor, so then I just wrote articles that were related to science. Do you think your activities helped you for your application?
It wasn't so much writing about it, my personal statement, that helped. I think what helped more was that all of these things made me read books, and then as a result I just had more of a knowledge of literature and more books that I can talk about. In the book club especially made me love literature, because reading stuff, my personal statement's a bit stressful, but just reading it in the book club really reminded me that I actually like it.
The next thing we're going to talk about is A-level subjects. When I did A-levels back in the day, we had AS subjects and then we had A2 subjects. So AS is what you did in year 12. You did exams at the end of the year, you got an official grade, and then you did A2 subjects in year 13. I studied 4 subjects for year 12 and 4 subjects for year 13. So I did biology, chemistry, physics and maths. And then I continued all 4 to year 13. On top of this, I also did an EPQ, which is called Extended Project Qualification, which is a dissertation essentially on a topic of your choice. What did you do?
We didn't have the AS system. I just did 4 A-levels, English, history, French and maths. And I also did an EPQ.
Why did you choose your subjects?
So for me, shall I go first? At the beginning of year 12, I knew that I wanted to study some kind of humanity. I thought maybe Japanese or Korean. Our school didn't offer those subjects, so I just decided to go with the humanities that I was best at GCSE, and that was English, French and history. And then with maths,
we sort of encouraged you to do maths.
Yeah, because I was thinking of doing something like philosophy instead, but I was not sure about whether I wanted to do like linguistics or human sciences, and for those kind of courses you need something STEM. So then I thought I'll just keep my options open and have maths as well.
Me and my parents also, we agreed that doing subjects that are seen as core is really useful, especially if you don't know exactly what subject you want to study at university. So things like English, history and maths are very good foundation subjects that will also keep doors open in terms of humanities and also in terms of economics or, science to a certain extent. So in terms of why I chose the subjects that I wanted, so for medical school, some subjects are compulsory. So generally you have to study chemistry and you have to study another maths or science subject. So that's why for me, chemistry was compulsory, maths made sense, and biology obviously was very logical. And then my 4th subject, I chose physics because I really love the subject. I think a lot of people for medicine, often for their 4th subject in year 12, they study something else like a humanity or a language. Obviously some people study physics, but it's not unheard of to do a non-science subject as your 4th subject. And also I think that actually ended up giving me an edge in terms of studying medicine at Oxford, because also doing 4 A-levels up to year 13 shows your academic rigor, right? Because traditionally people do 3. And also doing physics as a medical student was somewhat rare, so then in Oxford a lot of the questions I got asked in my interview, and we'll talk about this more in the interview section, were physics related. Do you also agree that studying 4 A-levels helped you for Oxford?
Yeah, definitely. I think my school said that if your school offers 4 A-levels and you want to go to Oxbridge, you should definitely accept that option. It's like if you don't have the option, then that's fine, but if you do, then you should accept it, because it's about pushing yourself as much as you can academically.
Yes, and I think it's one really good way of showing your academic potential. Also doing an EPQ on top of that, it's like almost a 5th A-level, so it really demonstrates your rigor. Obviously the downside of doing 4 A-levels plus an EPQ means that you have very limited free time. If you compare yourself to your peers, then you might feel a bit hard done by. Talk to me about A-level revision. When it came to revising for my A Levels, I think because I'd already done one set of exams, which were the GCSEs, I was less anxious about doing official exams because I'd already done it. I was a little bit less intense when it came to revision. I never did 10 hours of work again after year 11. So I obviously did study a lot, but I was slightly more balanced. And also because you have to jump through a lot of hoops when it comes to medical school application in particular. So you have to do work experience, volunteering, you have to do entrance exams and all these other things, preparing for interview and so on. There was a lot more things I had to do, not just study. I had to do a lot more things. I then couldn't actually spend as much time on doing revision, but that was probably good in the long run.
What helped me a lot was that we had exams at the end of year 12 and we also had mocks at the beginning of year 13, and I just took them as seriously as if they were the real A Levels, and I really tried to learn everything and tried to get the exact same grades that I wanted at the end. And that really helped me because as a result, when I came back to studying for the actual A Levels, I had done a lot of the year 12 content in really thoroughly, and I'd taken it seriously, which meant that there was a lot less to do.
Seeing it as a marathon rather than a sprint, even though that's quite cliche, is quite good, because then if you study at a low level throughout the whole of year 12 and then the summer and then year 13, you are way more prepared for your exams and less overwhelmed. So neither of us crammed. Actually, even in GCSE, I never stayed up all night, and I never stayed up later than 11:30 studying, because I don't think that's productive. And
I would say that I actually pushed myself in an unhealthy way less in A Level as well. Like in GCSE, I would often try and wake up at 5:30 or 6 to do revision before school, but I don't think I actually learned anything in that time, and I just stopped doing that in year 13 because it didn't work. Yeah.
We'll talk about what A Level grades we got when we talk about our university offers, because that's when it's the most relevant. That is where we're going to leave things for part 1. In the next part, we will talk about our university choices, interviews, how we prepared for them, and how we prepared for the entrance tests. We'll talk about our A-level grades and our offers, and then we'll give you some tips. Cool, see you in the next one.